This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and deal with some of the stuff that gets in the way of that. You can find video versions of lots of these chats on the Hope 1032 YouTube channel. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening. Today's guest is writer and filmmaker Kyle Portbury. He was part of last year's release, The Hopeful. He's worked on Shepherd, which we'll hear more about, and also this year's huge release, David, a musical animated epic looking at the life of the biblical character of David. It's in cinemas December 18, and during this chat, Kyle talks about how he found himself involved with some of the world's top animators, designers, and directors, going to Israel to craft the character of David, and what the influence of AI is on the creative industry and even projects like this one. Let's welcome Kyle to the show. This movie's massive, a $75 million budget, international cast and crew. At what point did you get involved?
At the time when I first got, an inkling that this was even something possible to go and have a conversation about, I was a university professor in Texas. And I had created an animated short film. I'm not an animation person by trade, live action. And so I was teaching film and television at a university in Texas. And I had, because sometimes you want to flex your own creative muscle whilst you're professoring. Is that even a word?
I'm sure it is. Let's go with that.
I'm sure it is. So I had developed a 5-minute historically based graphic novel short, which I did with 10 of my audio production students. And it ended up getting picked up by PBS randomly and ended up winning an Emmy, which hilarious because it was not getting made for any outcome other than just a bit of a creative outlet, right? And so the students, the fantastic thing about that is, imagine graduating from university with a certificate saying that you were a major part of an Emmy-winning production. The Emmys give you an official certificate for those guys to put in the resume. So really, really cool outcome. So I took that to a couple of festivals, and I was sitting at one and got talking to somebody else who I didn't know was one of the technical directors from Big Hero 6, who also happened to be in the same faith community that I'm part of. And so we got talking about these things. And anyway, fast forward a year, he goes to South Africa, and he's at an animation studio over there, and I see him post something, and then we were chatting about something. And a couple of weeks later, he was like, hey, the guys are looking for someone to help write. Would you be willing to get on a Zoom and have a chat with them? And I'm like, sure, sounds fun, right? And then all of a sudden that chat went really well, and then all of a sudden you're in Cape Town, and then all of a sudden you move there with your family, and then you're in this massive creative puzzle, which is you writing with the director Brent and the other director Phil, one of the other writers Sam Wilson. But then you have all of these amazing either storyboard artists or character designers that are in that story team as well. And so you'll write something and then you'll hand it over to storyboard, and then storyboard will have a look at that and they'll play around and they'll present something in storyboards, and then you'll go, ooh, there's something really, okay, so let's adjust something in the screenplay now because I've been influenced by that. Or someone in technical pipeline, because animation's, as well as being, analog creative in that respect, is also very heavily driven by geometric shapes in the technical side of it. So those guys will go away and they'll start previs, and they'll rig some really simple characters up. And then that will inspire you to do something. So you go back and you rewrite that sequence again. And so you have this lovely just flow of inspiration and ideas between departments, which was amazing. So, to bring that back to, how do you get involved in this? You're in the right place, I guess, at the right time with a certain skill set that's complementary to all those other skill sets that are required. And so, yeah, it was just one of those beautiful things where you find yourself in rooms in Africa of all the places.
Well, it sounds like this is a creative process you're detailing that seems totally normal to you and yet totally wild to so many people like listening on.
It was not normal actually even to me because it's not necessarily even how live action development works. So, but it is fairly normal in animation to have that. And so you had a couple of guys in there like Borja Montoro, who is one of the most famous character designers on the planet. Has done everything from Tarzan and Moana to the Twits that just came out on Netflix, and just a fabulously intelligent when it comes to story, but also just brilliant to just hang out with in general. Because back then he was in his late 50s, he's now in his early 60s, and we're still great mates. When I started on that film, that was in 2019, when I started on David. And then animation goes through phases. So that was phase 2, and then they go into phase 3 production, and now it's getting released in December. And so, which is December now, isn't it? Good grief. So only in a couple of days. So yeah, you end up having this fabulous relationship with other people, which actually feeds into how you're then looking at that story.
It sounds like you also have to be, on an individual level, very agile to be comfortable going from like a situation in Texas to then like Newcastle, Cape Town, South Africa, back to Australia. Like it's with family as well. That sounds like you're ready to just move if needed.
It's a fabulous adventure. Fortunately, I'm married to someone who likes that as well. And just I guess it's always that like you might be going along happily in your day and all of a sudden a phone call might come in and an opportunity is available, which I would say doesn't happen that often, but it's happened often enough in my life that you go, oh, well, this is actually great. I might wake up this morning thinking that life is going to play out this way, and by the afternoon it might be playing out in a completely different way I had no clue about.
It's a very exciting kind of life.
Yes, but it's also not. It's not the most stable in that respect, right? Like it's not. You don't have a set pathway most of the time, and that I guess isn't for everyone. So
and you have to be good enough to get those opportunities, I suppose. Like if your life relies on the next job coming through, surely you've got to be sort of good enough for those jobs to come your way.
Yes and no, because good enough, I mean, it's like an athlete, right? Like, so you can have natural ability in something, but if you don't work at it constantly and put time and effort into it, even if you're not getting paid. So, one of the things that would always fascinate me, because my writer's stand-up desk in the early days of the studio when I first moved to Cape Town was directly opposite Louis, who was one of the storyboard artists, and Borja, the character designer. And so I could always see what was going on their Cintiqs, which is where they draw on these big, basically, tablets. And at various parts of the day, they would be doing hand exercises, because otherwise you cramp up as an artist because you're sitting there drawing all day. So they took regular breaks to do hand exercises. So then I started thinking, I should probably do some sort of like something to throw my brain off a little bit. Because part of watching that is it kicks you out just of your own head, and you start thinking about other like more just physical activity. And then the other thing that they would do is they would, for a little bit of the time every hour, they would draw something completely unrelated to the film, just to stretch the brain a little bit. So, it's just that, I guess, that curiosity and that continually wanting to just improve, but not necessarily on what you're doing. Just on either technique or just your own mental agility. Borja was fantastic because he would take naps because he's Spanish, so he would have siesta at certain times of the day. And he had this fabulous story where his grandfather used to hold this big metal key at siesta time. I said, why would he hold a big metal key? And he would say, because he would lean it on the desk and he would nod off, and after about 10, 15 minutes, his hand would drop and the key would clatter and it would wake him up.
That was his alarm clock.
And then he knew it was time to go back to work.
That's so brilliant. I love that. But everyone needs a nap. Everybody needs something to kind of charge them up.
Yes.
For a story like about David, how do you frame what that story is going to be?
Yeah, well, I think it was really driven by the two directors, right? So Brent and Phil really early on were very much like, well, in order to understand that, we kind of need to feel the environment that he lived in for ourselves to kind of get a sense of what some of these, I guess, for want of a better word, like we have cliches about the story of David. Ones like, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Like we roll that off the tongue like it's like we know what it means. But they were very big on, well, let's go. So we did a couple of research trips to Israel. And you would find yourself walking through a wadi, which, above you there's just a towering wall. And it literally is, once you get above that wadi, which is just a gorge with a river running through it, which for a start you weren't expecting in a desert. So it's very lush in that little gorge, and it ends in a waterfall. So you're walking up there and you're looking up at this thing, and there's literally like a dead sheep carcass in that sun-bleached area above you. And you're like, oh, this is actually like legitimately walking through the valley of the shadow of death, because there is death above you because it's about 50 degrees Celsius up there.
Wow.
And there's no shade because there's no plant life, no vegetation. But here down in this narrow gorge where I am, it's beautiful and shady and the water's crystal clear and like I feel fantastic, right? And here we are in the middle of Israel wandering around on a research trip. Who does these anymore, right? Because it's not an insignificant expense to put 20, 30 people on a plane.
Well, and probably a little bit dangerous at times as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're jumping off, I remember one of them, Phil tells this great story about, he came up with the burning desire to tell this story of David 30-odd years ago when he was growing up in Zimbabwe. So, he would be that kid who was jumping off the canoe and like fishing with crocodiles, like swimming around kind of business. So he was a bit of an adventurous spirit himself. And so you go out with these guys and they do push the limits a little bit, And so you do get that real sense of what it is to walk in an adventurous spirit, not recklessly, but with that, that sense that there is an overarching, I guess, guiding power who is looking out for you to a certain degree, which isn't to say you should go out and do stupid things, but there is that comforting sense that I can go out into the world curiously and with a spirit of adventure because there is someone there who's got your back.
Like be curious. It's okay to be curious.
It's okay to be curious, and it's also okay to stand in fear of things and still move forward towards them.
Yeah.
Right? And that was something I think that really hit home when we were on those adventures together, because they kind of lived that with you, those two guys, Brent and Phil. And so that constant inspiration to push to find who this character called David was and why did he do these things that he did. And I think what you're going to find when you go and you sit down in the cinema, and it is a cinematic experience. You think about it, it's a giant story, right? And giant stories are best told on giant screens, And so I think when you go and you sit in the cinema and you connect with that spirit of adventure yourself, particularly if you have kids, right? Like you think about what's coming out in the cinema over Christmas, there's maybe Zootopia that you can go and enjoy as a family because it's going to have some stuff that'll cross certain generational divides. But I don't think there's something quite like David, which has got the ability to cross and connect with someone at 5 years old and then their grandparents 95 plus.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much in the life of David that if you've been brought up in Christian circles or have any kind of familiarity with Christian stories, you know it. We've heard about David and Goliath. We know that he was this shepherd boy that then becomes something so much more than he might have imagined as a kid. There's this epic kind of nature to his story. What was it about David's life that you especially wanted people to see on screen?
Yeah, and again, that comes back down to, I guess, the guidance of our two directors, right? Like they kind of pushed you into going, well, where do you see yourself in this story, so that when you're iterating scenes and sequences and putting up ideas for this, like how is this going to resonate for me, Kyle, right? So that then you've got a shot at the person who's sitting out watching it having that same resonant feeling, you know? And so I think what you do is you just play a lot, right? You be curious about, and you write, like I would write and iterate. There's probably 12 different versions of this film, like just in the territory that we wrote on one draft.
Wow.
So if you think about all the drafts that go into, there's probably close to 100 different pathways that film could have taken. Because you've just got to go, today I might spend 8 hours writing, and in the end, none of that may end up making the final film. And that's totally fine. Because tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to play down another avenue, and we'll see what we find down there. So I think it's that constant, it's almost like a permission to not have to feel like you have to solve everything in that day's play, you know? And so when you're working with other people that want to actually come along and play as well and try and discover things, and, you know, it's what I was talking about before, like you'd get inspiration, like one of the character designers would draw something, and the expression that they had put on that exploration of David, or one of his brothers, or Jesse, his dad, or Nitzvet, his mum, would just prompt you to go down a pathway that you wouldn't have gone down otherwise, because there was an expression, and you went, oh, I wonder, like I hadn't seen that cheekiness in that character before, or I hadn't seen that gravitas. Oh, I wonder if that would affect, and then you'd start going down that, like, how does that character trait now affect them? You know? So it's a lot of just openness and willingness to just play, and not be worried about what's going to make it in the end.
It's a really lovely, fun way to look at it, I suppose, because I would imagine more the filmmaking process, particularly for something as large scale as this, it's a little bit high stakes. Like, you want to make a movie that is going to be worth the money that was spent on it, that people are going to watch it and enjoy it, that it's going to do some justice to these characters, to have the freedom to write in a way that's not like you have to hit these particular beats and this particular thing and get this particular part of the story. Like, that sounds kind of nice, but where does the objective of the movie sit in that, or over that, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I think you have to slay that giant of going, if you get so wrapped up in that we're making this huge, big thing and there's investors' money on the line, all of a sudden you're done, right? Like, in the words of my 13-year-old son, you cooked already before you've even started, because that doesn't enable you to push the boundaries and be adventurous, right? Like, it's almost like that's your Goliath. It's so big and it's so overpowering that how could I possibly be a part of solving this puzzle? So you have to, I think, for the most part, just set that aside and just try stuff, you know? And I think what you're going to see when you go into the cinema is a film made by a whole bunch of people that were just having a lot of fun trying stuff. And that's the story of David, right? Like, it's that feeling, you know, yes, you've got these big oppressive things happening and these massive monumental stakes. You think about the stakes for Israel, you think about the stakes for David personally. You know, if something goes wrong, then everyone dies. Like, those are fairly high stakes, you know. And when David shows up to battle Goliath in the first place, it had paralyzed literally the entirety of the army of Israel. Until he rocked up and went, yes, I'm as afraid as you are, but somebody's got to do something. Right? So if nobody else is going to do it, then I guess it's me.
Yeah. So how would you describe David as a character?
I think he is a regular person who saw an irregular God. And because of that, it inspired him to take action. And particularly, you know, I look at now, I've got kids who are 11 and 13, and I want them to feel that freedom of, I can try things, I can do things within that framework of a God who can see well outside anything that I've got any control over. And so I can push those boundaries, and I can be playful and curious and creative within that structure. right? Because I have this expansive God that understands that the world and my place in it has more in store for me, even than what I can think of.
We do live in a pretty anxious generation, though, I think.
Oh,
an anxious world.
Yes.
So how do you begin to get over that anxiety?
You move to South Africa where they have no safety rails on playgrounds, and which was terrifying, right? But this was part of, in a weird way, this actually informed your understanding of David suddenly. Because you think about it today, like I'm not sending my 13-year-old kid down to get milk at the local shop for fear that maybe he's not looking both ways to cross the road. Whereas David's parents are sending him out to tend sheep in an environment that is hostile just in and of itself, but also has animals that can kill you, and you're looking after the livelihood of the family. And that's all resting on the shoulders of the youngest, most insignificant member of the family. So it doesn't really, when you look at it, you go, yeah, that doesn't really compute, does it? And then when we moved to South Africa, you're sending your kids off to swing on things. My favourite fail moment as a parent happened in South Africa because my son at the time, I think he was like 8 maybe, was playing on a jungle gym, no soft fall under it. And we'd been there a while now, so we got quite used to this. And he fell and he hurt his arm. And we're like, just get up and dust yourself off, you'll be fine. Well, anyway, he was complaining about it in the evening. Just take a Panadol, you'll be all right. Wakes up in the morning, still, my arm's hurting. And so my wife said, well, we'll just take you down to the local hospital, get it x-rayed, just rule that out. Anyway, it's broken. He still to this day reminds me, it's like,
of course he does.
Dad, remember that one time you were like, just harden up and don't worry about it? Yeah. But there is something, I don't know, like I'm not saying go and let your kids play dangerously and, break bones as a result of it, but he is aware now, I guess, that because of that experience, you stop and think for a second before you do something. Just take stock for a moment, which means that you can probably go down to the local store and get milk because he is probably going to look both ways crossing the road, right? So he's got a bit of agency now because of that. And I think when you look at a character like David, I think what we need, particularly in 2025, is some inspiration for kids to look at, well, how can I be courageous in my own little sphere of influence?
And have a bit of bravery, I guess. Learn how to feed the bravery.
Yeah, which again isn't to say go and be reckless and all the rest. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is like we need to give them a bit of ownership, right? Like it needs to be, I think, more than just, well, AI, for instance, is going to solve that, so I don't need to put any effort into it,
Yeah.
So it's just taking a little bit of... taking on a little bit of danger,
Yeah, and kind of just seeing what happens, And, yes, you want to be safe and all of those sorts of things. But even on the note of AI, like it's a really interesting thing, even from an intellectual point of view, where it's almost like you can outsource your thinking. And I know this personally, there are times where I've thought, I wonder if I just, let's see what AI would generate if I ask this and I ask that. And as someone who I enjoy a bit of writing, journaling, the creative kind of space, crafting questions for conversation, all this stuff. But if you use something outside of your brain to kind of put it together, it takes away that sort of human element of thought that I think it'd be really unfortunate if we lost that.
Yeah, it would be unsatisfying, right? It would be like getting lifted up by a helicopter and dropped on the top of Everest. Like it would be a nice view, but it wouldn't mean anything to me. I used to have, when I was 15, I had this huge big panoramic poster of Everest on the wall and always used to think I wanted to climb it. And then I climbed Kilimanjaro later on in life for a film and got to the top of that mountain and went, yeah, no, this is good. I don't need to climb Everest.
That's enough for me.
Because even though Kilimanjaro is not a technical mountain, it hurt a lot. And it was 20,000 feet in the air. So by the time you get to the summit, you're expecting that this summit is going to be a choir of angels, right? Like I'm going to stand on this mountain, I'm going to look out, I'm going to go, oh. But actually what happens is you stand on this mountain, you go, everything hurts, I can't think straight, I just want to get down. great, let's take some photos. I'm going to hold up a thing that's got signatures on it. I'm going to give thumbs up next to the sign so everyone knows I was here. Now, let's get off this mountain as quickly as possible. Right? So not what you're thinking it's going to be. It's interesting. I think people are going to go in, the climax of David is not killing Goliath. That's not the climax of the film. And in some ways, what you're going to see is somebody discovering and wrestling with that experience. You do this big thing, and all of a sudden, the consequences of that aren't what you're expecting. And therein lies the fun of the story, is in what happens after that.
Yeah.
Is the real heart of somebody who has to then reconcile the fallout with the picture he had of God who led him there in the first place.
Ooh, I love that. That just makes people really curious to watch what happens next.
And so it's not, you're going to walk in there thinking that you know this story, and you're going to walk out going, that was not the story I was expecting.
And I think that's what you sort of need to do a little bit as well, because there are so many assumptions people make.
Yeah. To
be able to break them a little bit, it's probably needed.
Yeah, because I think anytime we kind of feel like we've solved it, it's unsatisfying. Why go and watch a movie, for instance, when you know the outcome? But I encourage people, there's been lots recently, there's live action House of David that you can go and watch. And they're all very different to each other. And I think this telling of David's story is very, very different, and it's going to appeal to audiences in a very different way.
And I mean, David, as a Bible figure, he's someone that a lot of creative people especially use as this kind of icon for worship leaders and the like. Phil Wickham, who voices adult David in the movie, some of the conversations he's had so far about it, he talks about what it was like as somebody who's admired David as a psalmist and all of those sorts of things, to then be able to give voice to just some of his life in this movie. It was a remarkable thing. From a creative perspective, what is it about David's life you think we can learn in that regard or admire about him in the way he approached his creative songwriting, kind of worshipful side of life?
I don't know whether he had this from the start, but he certainly discovered it. But failure is the greatest friend that you will ever have in the world. That's what I learned from David. He was unafraid to fail and do it regularly and often, and also unafraid to take an adjustment from outside of himself and learn from that and move on to the next failure, right? And I think that that's something, and again, we were just talking about this with the safety of the world, right? We're always trying to make everything safe and take away all of the danger out of everything. When we do that, we lose the value of failure. So we don't get any feedback on, well, why shouldn't we do that? So we don't internalize that for ourselves. We just do it because we were told not to. Or we don't do it, we start rebelling against it, which isn't always positive, right? So I think the biggest thing I take away from his story is that you can't find success without a whole bunch of failing to get there. And that's probably the most valuable life lesson for kids that you can give, right? Don't not try to do well on that test because you're afraid that if I only get 60%, everybody else will think I'm stupid, right? That, I think, learning to, I only got 60%. Well, let's have a look at the 40% of the things that I didn't get right, and let's see if I can work out how I can master those things for next time.
And for the most part, we often grow up in an environment, even as adults, where you're exposed to people's highlights so much more than the failings. And yes, there's the kind of hashtag authenticity and all that sort of stuff. But it's that still feels like a little bit of a marketing tool to look at how my failings became my greatest asset or whatever it might be. It's very easy to think it is all highlights. It is all those mountaintop moments.
Yeah. And I try and encourage my children a lot, actually, too, because they'll go, but Dad, you look at you going off and doing this thing. And it's like, yeah, but you've lived life with me for long enough now to understand that there's large sections of Dad's time where he's developing stuff that never sees the light of day, right? Things that I'm really passionate about, stories that I really want to tell, characters that I think have got something really valuable to say. And for whatever reason, they just never make it. You know, so for every film I'm involved in or I've initiated and it's made it out into the world and someone can see it and enjoy it, there's probably 40 or 50 that just never got there.
Well, and even as you said earlier, for the David movie, 30 years in the making
Yeah.
before the director Phil
That's right.
even,
Yeah.
like, that's exhausting to think that it would take that long to
Yeah.
get an idea out into the world.
Yeah. So you can imagine living with that for that period of time, right? And Brent, the other director's been working with him. So Phil and Brent have been part of Sunrise Animation with a whole bunch of other people there for the best part of 20-odd years. You know, and so they've been amongst doing all these other great things. Like they've got Jungle Beat series and a couple of Jungle Beat movies and a whole bunch of other things that they do. In amongst all of those, they've always been going, yes, this story, though, is worth telling and it's worth sacrificing and it's worth almost going bankrupt for. And, you know, it's inspirational when you work with people like that who are like, you know, no matter what happens, we're going to keep on trying to tell this story. Like the amount of false starts that they had over that 30-odd year period of time. But it's amazing, isn't it? Like when you think about what's happening in the world right now, actually this is the right moment for a story like this to hit cinema screens.
From the perspective of culturally what's happening, or more because there's this increased interest in sort of Bible stories?
No, I think culturally, right? I think we need the hope that comes from outside of ourselves, because we're looking at a world right now. We were just talking briefly on AI. I was listening to a podcast on the way down where the guy who literally wrote the textbook on AI back in the 90s was talking about the dangers that we're heading into headlong at the moment, right? So you want to talk about Goliaths, like we're literally building a Goliath at the moment. And the window for us to be very careful about how we do that is closing very quickly.
And we're all just laughing along
And we're all
as we
just
enjoy
going,
the convenience.
Oh, great, the Google versions of this that we're able to use. But, you know, artificial general intelligence, totally different topic, is not the chat GPT that we're using, right? Like it is terrifying, actually, because it's got the ability to replace us with a higher level of intelligence. We should probably think twice before we continue the race towards it. There's like 8 people on the planet at the moment that are making that decision for the other 8 billion of us. We probably should pause for thought before we allow them to continue doing that.
But we don't feel like we have time is probably some people's reasoning behind why some people, if you're on the side where you think this is a danger, it feels like it's already happening and it's too far gone. And then you've got obviously a whole lot of people that go, this isn't an issue. This is advancement. This is exciting.
So this is the moment when you sit and you look at David's story, right? This is the moment where they're all standing around looking at the Philistine camp and you've got all of those exact same sentiments that we're discussing right now, right? Well, it's probably not that bad. And like, what if we do get subjugated to the Philistines? And then there's people who are like, oh, this is the end of the world. We're going to get killed and, you know, our wives will be taken off into slavery and what have you. And interestingly enough, what does it take? A young kid to walk along and be like, no, I think we should pause on this. And I think we should let God be God. And so I'm going to walk out there and let him do that. You know, so I think that inspiration, that hope, that, you know, with all of our best design and will that we can fix this, I think the inspiration of the story of David is that it's just going, I have to act, but I'm going to act in the knowledge that God's got it, right? Whatever the outcome is, I'm going to act in the knowledge of that. And I actually genuinely think that we need that inspiration at the moment. I think particularly for, you know, some of my nieces and nephews who have just moved into adulthood recently, you look at the world that they're moving into. It's not the world I moved into when I turned 18. You know, like there's a definite lack of the level of hope that we had growing up. You know? And you go, well, actually that doesn't need to be the case. And if we can re-inspire ourselves to just be a bit more like in action, then that's great.
It's exciting. No, it's exciting, and it's really inspiring to think of what's going to come for people watching the David movie, for just everything, all of the conversations that this movie and its existence really brings up.
And that's why cinema, Laura, right? Like, why cinema and not go and sit and watch it when it comes out on streaming, and why bother going and make... Because it's an effort, you know? Like, to take 4 people, the average family of 4, it's going to cost you $100 in the end of the day to go out and watch a movie, right? By the time you've made the effort and you've driven and you've parked and you've paid for popcorn and all the other things, and you've gone out to eat before and after, it's a big investment in time. But the benefit that we get from that is that it's like the modern Agora, right? Like, we get to go and debate in the lobby afterwards. And then when we go and sit down and eat together, we get to have this discussion about these characters that prompted us to think and feel a certain way. And we get to have emotions that we don't normally get to have safely, right? Like, we get to have some dangerous thoughts that we don't normally get to have because they're dangerous, but we've been given permission to have them in the cinema. And then we get to discuss those dangerous thoughts with other people. And, you know, you don't have the distraction. It's about the only place left now where we don't get distracted by other technology.
Yeah, because people are going to give you side eye. If your screen is on, if anything buzzes,
right?
Don't be that person.
Don't be that person. And we all glare.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you suddenly realise, oh no, that's my phone
that's
in my bag.
Yes. I'm the terrible person.
Yeah.
So I really do think you just get out to the cinema and experience this. I think it's going to be particularly for families. And I don't mean just if you've got young kids. I mean, take the family, the broad range, right? Take the grandparents, go yourself, take your kids, and have a family experience, and then talk about some of these big things like hope and curiosity and courage and destiny. You know? And talk about them and inspire yourselves.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Undistracted. You can find David in cinemas from December 18, and I will catch you next time. Until then, enjoy living this undistracted life.